Mike 2. Mike 2 here. LC secured. We're seeing sniper fire. No casualties.
A Marine platoon commander in Vietnam and recipient of the Navy Cross, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts. The best-selling author of Fields of Fire and 10 other books. An Emmy Award-winning journalist. Jim Webb served in the Pentagon as an Assistant Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Navy. During his tour of duty in the Senate representing Virginia, he was the legislative point man for the new GI Bill and criminal justice reform, and eventually ran for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. Jim Webb has experienced firsthand the minefields in our political process that make leadership in government so challenging. As part of the Marines Memorial Association's tradition of honoring commitment and sharing timeless leadership lessons learned in all walks of life, the conversation continues in this online extension of what normally takes place at the Marines Memorial Club, a public, nonprofit hotel, theater, restaurant, and event space in downtown San Francisco, serving generations past and generations to come for nearly 75 years and counting. I'm Correspondent Mike Cerre, and this is Leading from the Front. The personal opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of the Marines Memorial Club. Senator Jim Webb, thank you for coming back to the Marines Memorial Club. In fact, to an empty theater, it would have been full if we had not been shut down by COVID and you could have made your original engagement here.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to have missed that. We're looking forward to it for many months, and to talk at that evening about the Vietnam War and post-Vietnam, some of the things that I believe are important for all of us to understand things that happened after we were there. But it's good to be with you, and I appreciate having the interview today.
Well, you know, being a boxer and having been in the ring and then having been in the public arena as a politician for so many years, maybe it's comforting. We don't have to worry about any boo birds or any errant tomatoes or anything else. So this is kind of a walk in the park for us, I think, today.
Well, they can always come later. That's the story of politics.
Well, you know, leading from the front, by the very nature of it, you tend to draw a lot of fire beyond the fire that you drew leading from the front in Vietnam, but in your public life as well. Is that part and parcel from being someone who likes to be out front and being very outspoken about what he feels?
Well, no, but I think a leader has an obligation to make the case and to try to inspire people who are resonating with in politics, resonating with your message. But they used to say in the Marine Corps, the point man usually gets shot. So sometimes it's getting these positions out there. It takes a while to either persuade people or try to reach some sort of an agreement with them. But let me just say one thing, because I know one of the things that you had said you want to talk about was the different types of careers that I have had over the years. And there is a through line. I was thinking about this after we talked about it a little bit. If you look at leadership, there are about 5 or 6 components that apply no matter what situation you're in, whether it's a rifle platoon commander in combat, or running a Senate staff, or running a major company, or running the country. First of all, you have to have knowledge. And when we talk about knowledge, it means knowledge of your job, knowledge of process, knowledge of the jobs of the people below you and above you, and management skills. That's all in the knowledge box. You have to have character. It's very important in terms of integrity, for people to believe that what you say is what you mean, and for you to carry through. And you have to have loyalty to the people above you, loyalty down, which isn't always apparent in a lot of places in America today, but it's always been a very vital part of the Marine Corps, and loyalty to your mission. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to get your mission done. You have to have humility before your people. One of the great Examples of that for the Marine Corps has always been what Chesty Puller used to say: first you feed the privates, then you feed the sergeants, and if anything's left over, the officers eat. It shows that all people in an organization as human beings are equal, and that with rank doesn't come something special other than responsibility. And you have to have courage. We talk a lot in the Marine Corps about physical courage, but moral courage, I think, is harder. And finally, a leader has to have vision. You have to be able to explain what you're doing and why. And in our generation in the Marine Corps, we used to talk about the 5-paragraph order. And I know a lot of former Marines will still say that the 5-paragraph order is how best you explain what you want to do in any situation. What is the situation? What is the mission? How do you execute it? What kind of admin do you need? What kind of command and control? Whether I'm running a Senate staff or a 98-person staff in the Pentagon when I was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, or when I was a rifle company commander. Those were the guiding principles.
We also had a chance to talk, Jim, about some early inspirations, leadership inspirations in your life, and it comes very close to home, right around your own dinner table. Tell me about some of the lessons in leadership you learned right in your own home.
Well, I grew up in the military, and my dad was one of the finest leaders I've ever met. He didn't have the opportunities that I did educationally. He actually graduated from college my senior year in high school after going to night school for 26 years, and was the first one in our family even to finish high school from the Webb side. But he would always, our conversations were very much how do you inspire people? His comment was always, you can make somebody do something, or you can make somebody want to do something. Now, which one would you rather work for?
You mentioned boxing. That was one of your pursuits. And you mentioned having met someone who was very inspiring to you as a leader that you stayed in touch with over the years.
Not just met with him, he was my coach.
Tell me about him.
Harley Cooper was one of the great amateur boxers in our country's history. He easily, I think, could have been a world champion, probably light heavyweight. He fought as a heavyweight. He was an Air Force enlisted person. The greatest line he ever gave to me, because I used to talk to him about a lot of things. The greatest line he ever gave to me, I finally, when I got this NROTC scholarship in high school, and I finally went, wow, I'm going to get my tuition paid for, I'm going to get my books bought. So I quit my job and went out for track. And first race I was in, I was in a fairly large track meet, and I came in second in the 880, and I went into Harley. So Harley, I said, man, I went out for track, and I went into this race, and I came in second, and he just looked at me. And I said, what's the matter with that? I've never done this before. He said, who ran the first 4-minute mile? I said, Roger Bannister. He said, who came in second? And I've never forgotten that.
No, so given your background, it's no surprise that you were pretty much preordained to go in the military, but not initially to the Naval Academy and not initially to the Marine Corps. Tell me about that evolution.
So I knew I wanted to be in the infantry. I didn't know which one. And then when I found out about the NROTC scholarship, I saw that the Marine Corps was part of that, and once I really, with so many of us, once I got around the Marine Corps and got a feeling for its traditions, and not only that, but its accountability. That's the one thing about the Marine Corps that's always stayed with me, is you are accountable to the people who went before you for what you do. Some of the hardest times I had when I was in Vietnam, I would sit there and say, if I make it back, I'm going to have to face these people who were in the frozen chosen in World War II, and I'm going to have to try to measure up to what they did. So, once I got affiliated with the Marine Corps, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Any particular leadership lessons learned at the Naval Academy that stood you well throughout your subsequent military career?
We learned a lot about character. I was on the Brigade Honor Committee for 4 years, and I think the most lasting impact I had from the Naval Academy was the way that how seriously character and the honor concept should be taken, and to yourself too, not just for other people.
Did you have the confidence because of the basic school and Marine Corps training that you had the competence, the military competence, and then because of your family background and having been tested in other situations before, did you enter Vietnam a little bit more confident than maybe most? And did all these lessons hold up when the shooting started?
I think all of us who went through the hard combat in Vietnam, I think everybody came back with something that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. I used to say I was older when I was 24 than I am now, because it took so long to process all that out. But the skills and the daily grind and knowing, one of the things that I kept thinking about then was whatever happens now, tomorrow I've got to stand in front of my platoon. And I want them to respect me and I want them to trust me. Sometimes I take 2 or 3 hours to set my people in at night in our defensive perimeters. And we'd move every 4 or 5 days, usually out in Arizona Valley and some of those other areas, and set them in and sit down and talk to every single Marine every night. You find out things that maybe you wouldn't have found out otherwise.
I think you shared some of those lessons here in Fields of Fire, not your first book, but probably one of your more popular books that became kind of required reading for everybody who went to Vietnam after you, to give an insight as to what the daily process was going to be like and the kind of the emotional process. Was it the book, when you wrote it, was it to maybe help impart some of these leadership lessons?
Well, I think for me, I went from the Marine Corps into Georgetown Law Center in about a month, with about a few weeks break. And I went from an environment where everyone almost had been in Vietnam to an environment where almost no one had been in Vietnam and few really had been in the military in the same age group. And I found that there was no way that I could connect when we started talking about the Vietnam War. I mean, the mood against the war was so bad, and the mood against the people was so bad. And I finally reached the point where I said, this can be a real piece of literature rather than just I've been there kind of novel. Very difficult to sell that book back then. It was rejected by 12 publishers, and finally, when Prentice Hall agreed to publish it, the editor-in-chief of Prentice Hall, John Kirk, was a naval aviator in the Korean War. He got it. He wrote a note after all these rejections. He wrote a note saying the great novels of every war are the novels that have gone against the grain of the prevailing orthodoxy. And by validating what people did, you can have your own political view. It's not a political book, as you know, but you can have your own political view, but you cannot deny the people who went through this, the validity of their service.
So after the Marine Corps, after Georgetown Law School, how did you think you were going to use these leadership skills? What areas? I was curious to see that at one point you really wanted to be a reporter, and
I remember seeing one of your first reports. You were the first embedded reporter for the NewsHour, reporting from Beirut.
Well, I found out when I left the Marine Corps how much I loved writing. So I had this unintentional 2-track career. One is I love the result of writing. I hate the daily grind of writing. And I found, particularly after Fields of Fire came out, I found that I could make a living as an independent writer and mixing journalism in with it. And as you mentioned, Neil Lehrer sent me to Beirut in 1983. But I also was raised to lead. And, my dad, I'd talk to him and he'd be going, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, look, I like this writing part." And he says, I said, who'd you rather be, Ernest Hemingway or Teddy Roosevelt? He said, Roosevelt. He said, "What did Hemingway do? He just wrote some books and had some cats that didn't have any tails." And so I'd write for a while and I'd miss leading. And, Washington, the company town for government is where I would get experience leading and running things, which is sort of the way that I was raised.
After making your way to the Pentagon as a Assistant Secretary of Defense in charge of Reserve Affairs, and then eventually Secretary of the Navy, how transferable or scalable were your leadership skills in that environment?
Well, I mentioned a little while ago that there are five or six clear components of leadership that apply wherever you are. And, you know, the challenge moving into the Pentagon was learning the context of what was going to be required of me, how I was going to work inside a structure, et cetera. But I already had 4 years as a committee counsel on the Hill. I knew the Pentagon pretty well. I had spent a year in the Pentagon as a Marine.
So now let's jump forward to the most hostile, dangerous, bewildering battle space of all, inside the Beltway, inside the Capitol, and running for Senate. Well,
you know, I think people tend to underestimate my ability to work with other people. You hear some of the stuff about, you know, it was my way or the highway. No, but I have strong views, and I put them on the table. And I basically, when it's possible, I think I've been able to get things done. I wrote and introduced the post 9/11 GI Bill. I wrote it before I was even sworn in. I'd been talking about it. I had all this experience on the House Veterans Committee, and we developed this Republican Democrat coalition to get it done. We got it done in 16 months. Running for office, now that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, candidates and campaigns always talk about leadership. But well, you know, is that just lip service?
Here's the thing about political campaigns. I've been writing and covering politics, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, for years. But you never know what that's like until you cross that line and say, I'm running. And the world changes. And one of the reasons that the world changes is you can't control your own dialogue anymore. You know, you say, all right, I start off, I say, I always believe this where I've gone, but I believe in economic fairness, social justice, a sensible foreign policy, and accountability. Okay, good. You go out there and you say that, and they go, okay, now you get hit with the story of the day from the other side, and you know, you got one little sentence somewhere, and then there's, you know, all this stuff coming at you that you got to knock back down. And the other thing that was a big surprise to me, you know, even having been around, you know, DC politics as long as I have, is the amount of time you're expected to spend just raising money. It totally flabbergasted me. Where I started off, when I announced for the Senate, I had no money and no staff, and I was running against someone who had just gotten the highest number of votes for president at the Conservative Political Action Conference. I was 33 points behind. I called my former radio operator from Vietnam, was my fifth, I think, radio operator, a great friend of mine, very treasured lifetime friend, Mac McGarvey, had his arm blown off, got a tattoo on the stump, said cut a long dotted line, and was a night manager at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge in Nashville, Tennessee. I said, Mac, I need you to come and be my driver. I need somebody I can talk to 24 hours a day. He says, how can I be your driver? I only got one arm. I said, I'll say you're my driver. And he actually became my driver. Mac quit his job, moved into a bedroom in our basement for a year, and really he helped me chill out.
People always talking about leadership, you know. Is that just cheap talk? Do political figures really believe in leadership? Or at the end of the day, is it more accountability to some political ideology or whatever? Or do you think leadership still really matters?
I think it matters. But, you know, I think everyone has their own journey. I wrote in one book that I wrote when I was in the Senate, the first chapter was called Scorpions in a Jar. You know, everybody who's on the floor of the Senate has something that they've done in order to get there. And some of them is leadership. Some of it is, you know, working their way up from county assessor. But if you're not careful, you become slaves to having to raise money, constantly raise money. And what it does is it can compromise, you know, the through line type of leadership. That not everybody, but it certainly, when you got to go out there and constantly ask people for money, who's got the money? Now, leadership. I will say this, in my view, and everybody has their own view. In my view, the best president in my adult lifetime was Ronald Reagan, and because he had the vision that we were talking about. He could explain to people what he wanted to be done. He attracted good people around him, and he was a leader. He was a marvelous image maker. That's not the right word. I'd like to find a better word for what a symbolic leader. He's a symbolic leader. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. He could, he just knew how to do that. And he was not, people tend to think, or the people on the other side, you can imagine me going around a primary and,
as a Democrat,
a contested primary, and half the people in the room are going, man, you got some great ideas. And the other half are going, you're a Reagan guy. Why should I vote for you? Let me tell you what Reagan did.
So that was that independence, the kind of natural independence you had, is that you gravitated towards things that you thought were very important, and that credibility, that leadership style. You didn't care what party it was. That's what seemed to motivate you the most. Yeah,
I think, there are certain people, most of them who thrive inside the Beltway, or there are a lot of people in the military who they look at a military career where you're not supposed to make wrong kinds of noise if you want to get promoted, frankly. But I didn't fit in either box. And I work for Republicans. I work with Democrats. On the Democratic side of the aisle. But Winston Churchill changed parties 3 times. But in terms of the parties, I want to work for the betterment of the country. That's always my motivation, and I would lay out specifically what I was going to do.
Jim, you always say that the military taught you how to get things done and how to lead. The fact that you were just a one-term senator, can anybody read into that you were frustrated by how much you could get done? And
look, I'm not a career politician. I never wanted to be a career politician. One term in the Senate is 6 years. That's a term and a half of a presidency.
So you raised the bar for yourself and said, okay, let's go for a presidential bid in 2016. How did you have to adapt, if at all, your style and your capabilities to that arena?
Well, frankly, my major issues that needed to be injected into the debate were foreign policy, adventures, what had been going on in Libya and these places, and also this economic fairness issue where we needed to bring all working people to the table here. The Democratic Party was moving away from it. So I decided to go out there and start talking about these issues. It became very clear to me early on that I was not going to be able to raise the kind of money that it would take to really kickstart a campaign into a big national campaign. Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee. The human cost of going through it, and then the personal costs that can sometimes go with it, with having to either change your position or you see the game that goes on, and I just it wasn't going to work.
Given all that, having been in the Senate, made a run for president, do you still think leadership has a role in governance, or do you think it's somehow turned into a whole different agenda now, that it's not as much about personal leadership and it's more about building coalitions and building support and ideological policies and whatever?
Well, building coalitions and developing ideological positions is a part of leadership. I wouldn't want to demean people who are doing that. Allowing yourself to be compromised on the financial side is something each individual is going to have to decide for themselves and decide whether or not that is a compromise. But the end result, we're right now with the amount of money that's flowing around and the vitriol on a lot of social media sites and the digital site, it's just incredibly exhausting and sometimes counterproductive process.
Given this very critical year of great national crises, do you think the public's perception of possibly a serious leadership void is real or imagined, or has ever happened before in our history?
I think it's real.
Void. Do you think a leadership void is real?
I think the concern in the public about having good leadership is real, and it's also fed by so much of the stuff on social and digital media that's just ripping people apart when they stand up and say they want to do something. The negatives. It's hard to be positive.
Being the serial leader that you are and have always been, is it difficult for you not to be walking the point into something and explore other areas?
Well, I haven't just walked point. What I find things I care about, and that's what I do. And I got a lot of things I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim, we thank you for helping the Marines Memorial during this difficult time by honoring your obligation invitation to speak during our annual celebration of Vietnam vets. But we hope that you will come back here and we can do this for real with a real audience.
I'm really sorry to have missed the event this year, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Webb.
For more information on Leading from the Front and how you can support it and the Marines Memorial Association with your tax-deductible contribution during this challenging time, go to ourmission.marinesmemorial.org/lead.